The day I buried my father, Victoria Marshall, our neighborhood self-appointed HOA queen, left a foreclosure notice on my front door. That's when I knew this inheritance would be anything but simple. Your house is now HOA property, the notice read in bold letters. My hands trembled, not from grief this time, but from rage. My father hadn't even been in the ground for 6 hours. If you want to see how I fought back against a woman who tried to steal my childhood home, hit subscribe. Trust me, revenge is best served with a side of justice. I remember the last conversation I had with Dad like it was yesterday. He sat in his favorite armchair, the one Mom had reupholstered 3 times before cancer took her 5 years ago. His hands, calloused from 30 years of carpentry work, gripped the armrest as he leaned forward. "Alex," he said, his voice raspy but determined, "this house isn't just walls and a roof. It's our legacy. Victoria's been trying to force everyone into her little kingdom for years. Don't let her win." I didn't understand the urgency in his voice then. Now, staring at the foreclosure notice with its fake letterhead and Victoria's flowing signature, it all made sense. The neighborhood had changed since I moved away for college 10 years ago. What was once a close-knit community of families who borrowed cups of sugar and watched each other's kids had transformed into Victoria's personal fiefdom. The homeowners association she created 3 years ago was her weapon of choice, wielded like a sword against anyone who dared to maintain their independence. Dad had been her biggest obstacle. Our house, a craftsman-style beauty he'd maintained meticulously for 4 decades, sat right in the middle of a perfectly manicured street. While other homes sported identical beige paint jobs and regulation mailboxes, ours remained stubbornly unique with its deep blue exterior and hand-carved porch posts Dad had made himself. I walked through the empty house, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors Dad had installed when I was 12. Every corner held a memory. The height marks on the kitchen door frame, the dent in the living room wall from my first indoor hockey attempt, the window seat where Mom used to read me stories. Victoria couldn't take this away. I wouldn't let her. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Through the stained glass panels Dad had restored last summer, I saw Victoria's perfectly coiffed silver hair and pressed pantsuit. She stood like a vulture on our front porch, a thick folder tucked under one arm. "Alex, darling," she called out, her voice sickly sweet. "I'm so sorry about James. He was resistant to progress, but I'm sure you'll be more reasonable about joining our little family." I opened the door but kept the security chain latched. "I'm not interested in joining your HOA, Victoria. This house isn't and will never be your property." Her smile didn't waver, but her eyes turned cold. "Oh, but it already is. You see, when a property is surrounded by HOA members, it automatically becomes incorporated. It's called adverse possession. Your father's death simply accelerated the process. I'm no lawyer, but I knew she was lying. Dad had made sure I understood our rights before he got sick. That's not how adverse possession works, Victoria. Leave the legal proceedings to actual attorneys." "Speaking of attorneys," she said, pulling out a document from her folder, "I've already filed the paperwork. You have 30 days to comply with HOA regulations and pay 5 years of back dues, or we'll be forced to seize the property." The chain rattled as I slammed the door shut. Through the glass, I watched her smile widen as she placed the document on our welcome mat, the one Mom had made in her pottery class years ago. As Victoria clicked her way back down our front path in her designer heels, I pulled out my phone and did something Dad would have been proud of. I called Sarah Chen, the best real estate attorney in the state. If Victoria wanted a war, she'd get one. What she didn't know was that Dad had left me more than just a house. He'd left me his fighting spirit. Sarah Chen's office smelled like leather and determination. She studied the stack of papers I brought: Dad's property documents, Victoria's fake foreclosure notice, and a disturbing collection of surveillance photos I'd found stuffed in our mailbox. Each showed me going about my daily routine, getting the mail, watering Dad's roses, even sitting at his workbench in the garage. "She's building a harassment case," Sarah said, tapping one photo where I appeared to be arguing with Victoria through my car window. Making it look like you're the aggressor. Classic HOA intimidation tactic. But she's taken it to another level. A knock interrupted us. Martha Wheeler, our 8-year-old neighbor, hobbled in with her floral cane and a weathered manila envelope. I hoped I'd find you here, Alex. Your daddy wasn't Victoria's first target, and he won't be her last unless we stop her. Martha had lived across the street from us for 40 years. While other neighbors fell in line with Victoria's crusade, Martha remained stubbornly independent. Her garden gnomes and purple front door a middle finger to HOA conformity. 3 years ago, Martha continued, pulling documents from her envelope. Victoria tried the same scheme with the Rodriguez family. Young couple, new baby. Their house bordered the HOA properties. She filed similar paperwork, claimed their property was automatically incorporated. They couldn't afford to fight. Sold the house for half its value to her daughter's real estate company. Sarah's eyes narrowed as she examined Martha's documents. This is a pattern. And look at these signatures. They're nearly identical to the ones on Alex's foreclosure notice. She's using the same templates. My phone buzzed. Another email from Victoria, this time copying the entire HOA board. She'd attached photos of my father's workshop in the backyard, claiming it violated building codes. Dad had built that workshop with his own hands 20 years ago, long before Victoria's reign began. She's trying to create a paper trail, Sarah explained. Make it look like there are legitimate violations. But here's what she doesn't know. I pulled some county records. That HOA of hers, it was never properly registered. She's been operating without legal authority for 3 years. A commotion in the hallway drew our attention. Barbara Jenkins, Victoria's right-hand woman on the HOA board, burst into the office. Her usually perfect makeup was smeared, her hands shaking as she clutched her designer handbag. I can't do this anymore, Barbara announced. Victoria's gone too far. Last night, she asked me to notarize backdated documents. Papers saying your father had agreed to join the HOA before he died. When I refused, she threatened to expose my underwater mortgage to the board. Sarah leaned forward. Would you be willing to put that in writing, Mrs. Jenkins? Before Barbara could answer, my phone buzzed again. A text from my neighbor Tom. Victoria's at your house with a locksmith. Says she has court orders. I jumped up, but Sarah grabbed my arm. Wait. Let her dig herself deeper. I'm calling the police. And then we're going to give Victoria exactly what she wants, an audience. Martha smiled, her weathered face gleaming with mischief. Time to show that power-hungry vulture what real community looks like. We arrived at my house 15 minutes later to find Victoria supervising a locksmith at my front door. She'd gathered her usual crowd of HOA supporters on the lawn, all wearing their regulation beige and navy clothing like some kind of suburban army. Stop right there, I shouted, Sarah and Martha flanking me like generals in this absurd suburban warfare. Those court orders. Let's see them. Victoria's smile faltered for just a second before she recovered. Alex, darling, you're making a scene. This is a simple matter of property transition. The HOA has legal rights. The HOA, Sarah interrupted, that was never legally registered? The one operating without proper authority? That HOA, Mrs. Marshall. The locksmith paused, looking uncertainly between us. Victoria's face flushed red beneath her perfect makeup, but instead of backing down, she pulled out her phone. You want to play hardball? Fine. Check your email, Alex. I think you'll find some interesting photos of your father's final days. Wouldn't the board love to know what really happened the night he died? My blood ran cold. What was she talking about? Dad had died peacefully in his sleep, hadn't he? Victoria's words hung in the air like poison. The gathered crowd murmured, their eyes darting between us. I felt my hands shake, but not from fear, from fury. She was trying to use Dad's death as a weapon. The night your father died, Victoria continued, her voice carrying across the manicured lawn. He called an emergency HOA meeting, asked to speak to the board privately. He was distraught, talking about mistakes, about protecting you. Hours later, he was dead. Convenient timing, wouldn't you say? The memory hit me like a thunderbolt. Dad's last voicemail, the one I'd been too busy to answer. Alex, I found something. About Victoria. About what happened to the Rodriguez house. Call me back. Kiddo, it's important. Martha stepped forward, her cane striking the concrete with purpose. That's not how it happened, Victoria. And you know it. I was there that night. Tell them what James really said. Victoria's perfectly manicured nails dug into her phone. Martha, dear, your memory isn't what it used to be. My memory is just fine, Martha snapped. James came to expose you. He'd found the paperwork, hadn't he? The real reason you started this HOA. Barbara Jenkins emerged from the crowd, clutching a leather portfolio. I have the original documents right here. Victoria didn't start the HOA to protect property values. She created it to hide her real estate scheme. Every house she forced into foreclosure, every family she pushed out, they all ended up being bought by shell companies she controls. The locksmith quietly packed his tools and slipped away. Victoria's supporters began to whisper among themselves, their unified front cracking. It's all lies, Victoria hissed, but her composed facade was crumbling. I built this community. I protected us from declining values, from undesirable elements. Like the Rodriguez family, Sarah asked, her lawyer's voice sharp. All the Patels, all the Clarks, all families who mysteriously had to sell after joining your HOA, all properties now owned by companies that trace back to you. I pulled out my phone, playing Dad's last voicemail on speaker. His voice, strong despite his illness, filled the tense air. Alex, I found something. About Victoria. About what happened to the Rodriguez house. Call me back. Kiddo, it's important. He died 3 hours after leaving that message. I said, my voice breaking. Not from his illness, but from a stroke. The doctor said it was brought on by extreme stress. What did you say to him that night? Victoria. Victoria's mask finally shattered. He was going to ruin everything. 30 years I spent in this neighborhood, watching it decay. People like your father, with their individualism, their resistance to progress, they were destroying our property values. I saved us. I made this community worth something. By destroying actual community, Martha countered. By driving out young families, by threatening elderly residents. That's not progress, Victoria. That's greed wearing a designer suit. Suddenly, Tom stepped forward. As head of the HOA Architectural Committee, he'd been one of Victoria's strongest supporters. I have something to add, he said, pulling out his own phone. I've been recording HOA meetings for years, including the night James Mitchell died. Would you like to hear what really happened, Victoria? The color drained from Victoria's face. You're all making a terrible mistake. This neighborhood needs me. No, I interrupted. What we need is our community back. Sarah, would you like to explain to everyone what happens next? Sarah smiled, holding up a thick stack of papers. I have here signed affidavits from 12 former homeowners, all victims of Victoria's scheme. I also have proof that the HOA was never legally registered, making all its actions null and void. But most importantly, I have a court order freezing all assets connected to Victoria Marshall and her shell companies, pending a full investigation. As if on cue, a police car turned onto our street, followed by 2 unmarked vehicles. You can't do this, Victoria whispered, but there was defeat in her voice. Actually, I said, pulling out one final document from my father's workshop, we can. And Dad, he kept meticulous records of everything you did. Right up until the end, he was protecting this neighborhood, protecting me, from you. Victoria's phone clattered to the ground as the police approached. But even as they led her away, she turned to me with a smile that chilled my blood. You have no idea what you started, Alex. No idea at all. 3 months after Victoria's arrest, I stood in Dad's workshop, running my fingers over his old workbench. The morning sun streamed through the windows, highlighting decades of sawdust in the air like golden memories. A half-finished birdhouse, his last project, said exactly where he'd left it. The criminal case against Victoria had revealed a web of corruption spanning 5 neighborhoods. 17 families had lost their homes to her scheme. The Rodriguez family's lawyer called yesterday. They would be able to buy back their house at the original price. Victoria's real estate empire was crumbling, her assets frozen and her reputation in tatters. But her final words still haunted me. A knock at the workshop door pulled me from my thoughts. Barbara Jenkins stood there, clutching a thick manila envelope. We found these in Victoria's home office. The police said we could return them now that they finished processing the evidence. Inside were decades of photographs. My father at community picnics, helping neighbors with repairs, teaching local kids woodworking in his workshop. Victoria had been watching him, watching all of us, for 30 years, documenting the very sense of community she claimed to protect while systematically destroying it. There's more, Barbara said softly. Victoria kept detailed records. The night your father died, he confronted her with proof of her first victim. Before the Rodriguez family, before the HOA, there was another house. Your mother's childhood home. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Mom had always said her parents sold their house because they couldn't afford the upkeep. But according to Victoria's records, she'd orchestrated their financial troubles, using her position at the local bank to manipulate their mortgage. Your father discovered the truth while organizing his papers for you, Barbara continued. That's why he called a meeting. He wanted to expose her without revealing your mother's connection. He was protecting her memory, right until the end. A car door slammed outside. Through the workshop window, I watched Martha shepherding a young couple up our front walk. The Rodriguez family, back for the first time since they were forced out. Their little boy, now 4, stared in wonder at Dad's front garden, still blooming with Mom's favorite roses. Tom appeared with a stack of papers. The HOA was being legally dissolved, its regulations wiped away. In its place, we were forming a true neighborhood council. No mandatory fees, no color restrictions, no power plays. Just neighbors looking out for neighbors, the way Dad always believed it should be. We found something else in Victoria's papers, Tom said. She didn't just target families she could profit from. She went after people who represented what she couldn't have, genuine connections, real community. Your father was her biggest threat because people naturally looked to him for leadership, not her. The afternoon sun found me in Dad's chair on our front porch, watching neighbors gather for an impromptu block party. Martha was teaching Mrs. Rodriguez her secret lemonade recipe. The Rodriguez boy played with a wooden train set Dad had made years ago, while his father examined the craftsmanship with obvious admiration. Sarah arrived with news from the prosecutor's office. Victoria had accepted a plea deal. She'd serve time and make restitution to her victims. But it wasn't the legal victory that mattered most. It was watching the neighborhood come alive again. Barbara's granddaughter ran past, her purple hair flowing behind her, a style that would have given Victoria an aneurysm. Tom's husband was finally displaying his award-winning garden gnome collection. The Patels were moving back in next week, and Mrs. Clark was already planning a welcome-home curry night. I pulled Dad's last project, the unfinished birdhouse, from my bag. With trembling hands, I opened his old toolbox. The wood was smooth beneath my fingers as I picked up his favorite chisel, worn smooth by decades of use. "You were right, Dad," I whispered, making the first careful cut. It was never just about the house. It was about building something that lasts, a real community. As the evening light faded, neighbors gathered on our porch, sharing stories about Dad, about Mom, about the neighborhood's history. Children played on our non-regulation grass, and laughter echoed down streets that had been too quiet for too long. Victoria had tried to create a perfect community by force. But Dad had shown us the truth. Real communities aren't built with rules and regulations. They are built with open doors, helping hands, and hearts that remember what matters most. I hung the finished birdhouse on Mom's favorite oak tree, right where Dad would have wanted it. A reminder that some legacies can't be stolen, some bonds can't be broken, and some houses will always be more than just property. They are home.